a banner. Thanks a million, Penny, there for pressing record. Yeah, this webinar will be recorded for anyone who couldn't make today. To introduce myself, my name is Nora Trench Bowles. I sit on the board of the Irish Stammering Association, and I'm one of the very proud co-conveners of the Bród Stadaireachta Stammering Pride initiative. To point to my fellow co-conveners, we have Penny Farrell, Adele O'D, and Mark Noonan. We're all here today. And I am really delighted that we are joined by the one and only Conor Foran for tonight's event. Conor, as many of you probably know, is a creative practitioner from the beautiful sunny southeast of Ireland. Conor is now based in London. Among his many accolades and jobs, Conor does the very cool graphic design for the Irish Stammering Association, and we're very lucky to have him. And Conor is also the editor of the very, very cool Dysfluent magazine, which I see is getting slightly blurred by the camera there. Um, Conor, I'm sure, will describe what Dysfluent is far better than I can. But I suppose the particular focus of this evening's event is the latest edition, the latest issue of the Dysfluent magazine that Conor edits, which is particularly about stammering pride, and I think is really interesting. If I unblur my camera, maybe we can see a little bit better. So I think it's really interesting the way this particular issue challenges some of the contradictions, nuances, tensions when it comes to Stammering Pride, as well as the celebration of Stammering Pride in a really creative way. And I'm sure Conor will talk us through that a little bit more. Our running order for this evening is Conor will speak for about 30 minutes, but listen, we're on stammering time, so Conor will speak for however long Conor speaks for, and then he has promised a chance for Q and A with us all here this evening. So it would be great if you could kind of save your questions for the Q&A session at the end. But I would maybe encourage it if something pops up in your head during Conor's presentation, if there's something really burning that you would like to ask, maybe write it in the chat so that we don't forget it for later on. Penny Farrell is going to be emceeing the Q&A at the end. So that's enough from me. Really, really glad to see the group here today. And thanks in particular to Conor for being here. And Conor, over to you.
Thanks, Nora, for that really lovely introduction and the kind words. And also thanks to Penny, Mark, and Adele as well, part of the Bród Stadaireachta team. Yeah, I'm so delighted to be here, especially like as an Irish person who stammers, and also being part of the ISA team as well. It is kind of funny, kind of being on this side of it, which is really, really nice. But also, yeah, I think being an Irish person who stammers and being able to speak to like Irish people in this call and also like other people from around the world is really special to me. And I also recognize loads of familiar names and faces, which is really, really, really nice. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here. Um, so as Nora said, I'm Conor. I'm the founder of Dysfluent, which is a creative and collaborative practice about stammering. Um, um, in this talk, I'm going to like talk a little bit about me and where the where and how the Dysfluent project started, and how I think Stammering Pride kind of is really encoded in the DNA of like all the projects that Dysfluent does. So yeah, without further ado, let me next page. Yeah. So yeah, to start, as Nora said, I'm from Kilkenny, which is in the sunny southeast of Ireland. But when this picture was taken, I think in February of this year, I think that was like one of the rare days, like when the sun did come out. But even at that, it's like really cloudy. But but yeah, but I've been stammering since I can remember. But when I was growing up, I never knew anyone else who stammered. I think stammering was something that I don't think anyone, like even myself, like ever really wanted to talk about. Whether that was like me, my friends, my family, schoolmates, teachers, like it was definitely there. But I like I never would have imagined that like at this stage of of like my life, like I'll be talking about stammering so much and making so much work about it. It's really mind blowing. I think if like my younger self could see me now. Um, but when I was younger, I was I was I was lucky enough to grow up with loads of like countryside and green space near me, and that's a little a little luckily luckily enough, in London, there's also a lot of green space, especially where I'm living. And this is a picture that I took yesterday, which the weather here is finally getting nice. Thank God. The winter has been so long. But I've been in London for 6 years now, and I live with my wonderful partner, Bart, who also works with me on Dysfluent. And together we run a design practice called Take Courage. We make websites, identities, and other kind of graphic design materials. Um, and of course, the ISA is one of our clients, which is really nice. But also a lot of the work we do is with like farming organizations as well, which is really, really special, especially because if like I zoom out, I've kind of been doing loads of stammering kind of projects in like loads of different ways. It's really, really cool. Um, but yeah, so if I talk about Dysfluent in my spare time, kind of like whenever I have time away from Take Courage, I'm working with the ISA. Dysfluent is what I do in my spare time. So um, and Dysfluent as kind of a name, like really encapsulates a lot of different projects. Like at the beginning, it was really just about a font and then a magazine, but over the past few years, it's gotten a lot bigger, and it's really allowed me to explore different mediums and really bring stammering to like new kind of like visual spaces and artistic expressions. I'd like to I like through typography, writing, editing, workshopping, designing, sculpture, a boss that I made on Twitter, a tote bag, a billboard. It's really kind of like evolved. So it's really nice that it's becoming kind of it's becoming a practice in itself, where I can explore stammering with art, design, visibility, aesthetics, politics, academia, and loads of other things. And I think the best part about it is really the amount of like people that I get to meet and work with. It's it's been really amazing, even since the second issue was launched. It's really kind of like opened up new opportunities to work with loads of other people who stammer, and also SLTs as well. So, but for this talk, I'm not going to talk about all this stuff because I think that would take me all night. But I'm just going to talk about the font Dysfluent Mono, which kind of begun the whole project, then the magazine, then the Making Waves flag, and then the billboard at the Whitney Museum, which is the most recent project. So yeah, I'll start with the font. So on each of the projects too, I've also noted the people that have been part of making it, because again, that's really important to me that I note that, because like all these projects, they wouldn't be what they are without like all the people that I collaborate with. So yeah, Dysfluent really just started with this font called Dysfluent Mono, and that began when I was in college, and I wanted to explore my speech. And I remember at that time in college, I was having a particularly difficult time with my stammer. And this was for my final year project. So I was really just experimenting with like ways in which I can visualize stammering in speech. And I think back then, so that would have been 7 years ago, or maybe 8, that I think even back then, like a lot of this work is kind of Stammering Pride coded, but I think at the time I wouldn't have ever thought that, especially I think back then maybe Stammering Pride wasn't even, those two words maybe even weren't being put together. But it's nice looking back on these sketches and this work where Stammering Pride has kind of like always been there, because I think the moment you've visualized stammering like in this way, it kind of does kind of exude kind of this idea of pride. But yeah, the reference on the left is a concrete poem by Marinetti from the 1910s. So this really inspired me and loads of other pieces of work like this, because it really just showed how typography and sound can be explored like playfully. And at this time, what I was doing was basically investigating the relationship between the verbal, like the voice, and the visual, which is the typography, and how typography can be expressive and be used to support the textual content. And from there, I like made basically a system for the font where it's really based upon the kind of 3 kinds of stammering that I identified within myself. So like prolongations, which is the letters being stretched, repetitions, and then blocks. And I think what kind of anchors the font is that it's not seeing stammering speech as broken or fragmented, but instead as sound forming over time. And this was actually a phrase that I had from like 7 years ago that I found, and I was like, oh, this also feels very Stammering Pride coded, to look at it in this kind of alternative way, that it's not about speech being broken, but rather it being created. So and then yeah, so the way this comes together then is that in this is a page from the first issue, and you can see how in the body copy of the magazine in the interviews, that's where the font kind of really shines, because it's being used to actually represent the person's voice. And by doing that, in my opinion, it really does just kind of exude pride and kind of show how that is that person's voice. And like even if it like can't 100% like literally be the stammer, because it is impossible like for typography and letter forms to replicate sound. That's just a fact. But the way this expressively does it, I think it's kind of a fun and it's twist on, I think, everyone's relationship with a stammer in a way, whether you stammer or not, that I think to expect the stammer on the page, well, I suppose it's not expected at all, really. So yeah, so this really formed the whole idea behind the magazine, that it's expressing the stammer in a really proud kind of like outward way. And also after the first issue was launched, which was in 2019, I wrote actually an article in the Journal of Interdisciplinary Voice Studies, and this issue was this special issue was edited by Dr. Maria Stewart and Dr. Daniel Martin. And this was actually I like really fun looking back on it, because it gave me a chance to really investigate the kind of academic side of what I was doing, that there's more to just kind of the letters being stretched and repeated, but rather um, um, there was a bit more detail in kind of figuring out how the experience of stammering can be expressed in typography. So in the case of Dysfluent Mono, the font like represents the stammer not in a literal way, but it just plays with expectations of legibility. So one thing I said in this in this in this article was visualizing disfluency can become a matter of playing within the parameters of what is considered disconcerting but still legible, and that for me also kind of extends to experience of kind of speech disfluencies in general, of like what's acceptable, and yeah, so that's kind of how the font came about. And then in terms of the magazine itself, so I just touched on the first issue there, but I kind of want to go a bit deeper on it. So these are all the people that have been part of both issues, and these are like people that have been interviewed or that have helped produce it, or there's been mentors there that have really helped me. There's some SLT consultation as well, which is amazing. And you recognize a lot of familiar names here too, of course. So I'm really, really grateful for everyone being part of it. Um, so the first issue, yeah, launched in 2019, and this was just an introduction to what it means to be a person who stammers in general, basically. And this was based on a publication that I made in college. So I had done this kind of first version in college, and then once I left college, then I worked on it more, just because I knew there was something a bit like I don't know. I think I recognized that I think there is something good here, and I'm really happy that I persisted because the reaction's been amazing. So this is actually sold out, but there is a PDF version that's available on the shop. Um, and I really wanted for both magazines to basically just lean on the typography just as this expression of voice and language. And the quote on the cover of 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 issue one is by one of the interviewees called James Connolly, and it reads, "Is it all about breathing? Is it all in our heads?" And I really, really liked this because it kind of spoke to ideas of that no one knows where stammering comes from, what it is. It's this mysterious thing, especially if people who don't stammer and they're wondering what's going on. And I think the whole this issue was really speaking to maybe um people who don't stammer, especially because I really just wanted it to be packaged to these conversations to be packaged in this well designed way that could be readable or read by designers or artists who might find this magazine in a in a magazine shop, in addition to being read by people who stammer and their friends and families and and allies. Um, and and in the first 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 issue, everyone is based in Ireland because at the time that's how I or that's or those were the people who I had access to. And this first interview was with James Connolly, who was a friend of a friend. And James was the first person that I'd ever met who stammered. And I think we met up in a cafe that he worked in, and we spoke for 2.5 hours. And I recorded the whole thing, and it was just so special. Um, and I think everyone who stammers that first person who you meet who also stammers is a really, really magical moment, because you're like, oh, I'm not the only person who changes words and avoids things and does all this kind of behavior. So this was a really, really special one for me. Um, And of course, in the magazine too, there's some ISA representation. So, um, um, this is Evan Murphy and her mum Veronica, and this was also a lovely encounter too because of the statistic that it's that that does more men who stammer than women do, and I really loved this opportunity to give them space and time to describe their like relationship with their stammers. And like although it was only 60 pages, um like it is quite a meaty thing because it is all just these long form interviews. So they really do touch on the core of what it means to be a person who stammers and questions that you the questions you might ask yourself and questions your friends ask you and even just those kind of those moments of being in a cafe and all those kind of stories that we all have. So it's really nice that those can be documented in this kind of authentic way. So that brings me on to the second issue, which launched last October. And there was a big gap between issues. And I mean, that's for many reasons, the pandemic and like energy levels, because I do this in my spare time and it just takes so long to make even one. So I'm not sure when the next one's going to be, but I promise that there will be a next one. But be patient. Right? So yeah, um this issue about um this issue is about Stammering Pride, as Nora said at the start of the call. And I've known, so like say when this launched last October, that meant I was working on it, I think, since since the previous May. And I really knew that Stammering Pride is it's this thing that keeps kind of popping up, like, but there isn't a whole lot about it. And I really wanted to, well, apart, of course, from Stammering Pride and Prejudice, like which was absolutely a catalyst in the creation of this magazine. But apart from that, it felt like, oh, there is more space to kind of just to discuss things and to loop in and kind of loop in people from around the world. Um, and yes, actually, the blurb of the magazine is Stammering Pride has emerged as a compelling movement in the cause for self affirmation, dignity, and equality for people who stammer. But what does it mean to be proud of something you associate with struggle and pain? Um, and like the first issue, it's mainly a collection of interviews with people like Patrick Campbell, Penny Farrell, Crystal Kubert, just name a few. And there's also in the middle of the magazine, there's a Stammering product, there's a Stammering product art gallery. That's what I call it because it's basically just a few pages in the middle of the magazine that is that like features features artwork from four artists who stammer that make uh, uh, who make work about stammering. Um, so from a design perspective, in terms of Stammering Pride, I knew that there was a lot of like opportunity to express that in as many ways as I could. So with the cover, I really wanted to kind of push the format and like if this was on a magazine shelf, kind of really capture the reader's eye because of course like in a sea of magazines it's and it can be hard to stand out. So like the first issue, it's just typography and so the quote that reads, "The prouder I get, the more change happens," and this is an adapted quote from one of the interviews inside the magazine, and I really loved that idea and that statement because there's so many conversations about what uh, pride means, what change means, what acceptance means. But I was like also really aware that I I really don't want the work to steamroll other people, which is something that me and Jack Nicholas in the magazine talk about. that in the toxic positivity, I think you do have to be quite careful about it because everyone's on their own journey with stammering. That's why when you unfold the cover, then there's kind of this internal monologue amongst these big, proud, stammering characters about those recurring thoughts that people who stammer may have, and these are all like those small statements. They all come from interviews in the magazine too. So it was nice that that this cover was kind of made from those real, authentic conversations that I had with people. Um, and I actually really wanted to just read a bit of the editor's note as well, just like not the whole thing, but just read a small bit of it. I've got the magazine here as Nora demonstrated earlier. The cover goes out kind of like on screen, of course. It's better on screen than on here. Um, but I just wanted to read a small bit. So yeah, so that's so I read the blurb, but at the end of the blurb it says, but what does it mean to be proud of something you associate with struggle and pain? For some, this is radical thinking. As a person who stammers, I get that it's not simple. I'm eager to platform Stammering Pride because I believe in it. It's given me the understanding that stammering is part of a larger story. Seeing it as a disability and as natural variation moves it out of a medical space of needing to be fixed and into a social justice effort that celebrates human diversity. As the world becomes more understanding of difference, why can't stammering be embraced too? Um, so yeah, in terms of the contents, then I basically met with, I think I forget the number now. I think it's 8 interview or like people that I met. I think it's 8. I can't remember the exact number because like there were some interviews that had multiple people, but most of them and were all recorded on Zoom and transcribed. And this one is this one on screen is from Krista Hubert, an interview called Stammering Freely. And you can see how how different mono is being used in a pull quote, because they basically decided that a pull quote, like which is a magazine kind of editorial staple, that it's a quote that is basically pulled out from the main content. And I wanted to play with that idea of the perfectly said phrase, that's what a pull quote basically does, that I basically like you basically scan the text and you're like, oh, that's great, I'll pull that out. But instead of like pulling it out exactly from the text, I left it in the text. So I just wanted it being part of the actual conversation, which is kind of a commentary on like that there really is no perfectly said phrase. Like it can be really over engineered. But I think in these conversations that are so authentic, it was really important to me that I didn't like edit it to be perfect. And yeah, so in terms of the stammering art in the middle of the magazine, and there's work by Paul Aston, Audra Olovich, Philemon Bolts, and Jerome Ellis. And this was really important to me to have art in the actual magazine, because I really believe in art as a catalyst for challenging views, opinions, and understandings about things like stammering. And actually, that brings me on to the next project, which is the flag. So, in terms of making like a symbol or making art about stammering, the flag was a really special project, which also had a lot of uh, collaborators involved, as you can see here. And the team who made the flag, we really wanted to make sure that it's a Stuttering Pride flag, that it's not the Stuttering Pride flag. Again, it's being conscious of steamrolling people or kind of toxic positivity, that this is the flag that we made. And you're welcome to make your own flag if you don't like this flag. But it's also an invitation that if you do like it, you can use it. And yeah, this project was so special. I remember Patrick Campbell, who was my mentor on the magazine and also a good friend of mine. He got in touch with me, and he was talking with Ramdeep Roman, who's also part of the flag team, who's on screen now. And I think they were talking about a flag. because all pride movements, I mean, they've got to have flags, right, and some symbols. So I think between us kind of discussing it initially and it being made, I think it was maybe like 5 months or even less. Like we really just did it really fast because we were so excited. And I think at the energy that we all had in those calls was just something that I'll never forget, because we were just really, really excited about this idea of making something that could kind of stand for the beliefs that we all had. Um, and yeah, so this picture is of Ramdeep holding the flag on Hadrian's Wall in at the UK. So yeah, in terms of the flag and the work behind it and the meaning, so we really wanted it to be very symbolic and to really mean um something quite deep and conceptual, that we kind of wanted to stay away from existing visual kind of tropes and puns on stammering, which like we've we've all seen the kind of the symbol of the man talking, but it's a speech bubble that maybe like cracked or maybe it's broken or kind of stuff like that. Or even with the work I've done with Dysfluent, that I've stretched letters and stuff like this. Like we really I just wanted a new visual. So we had loads of ideas. There was stuff like, I think they were all roughly nature based, which was really, really interesting. And then that became one of our core values, which you can see here on screen. And because I think by using a symbol that is natural, it shows stuttering as a natural, varied uh, phenomenon. And the waves really came about because of the pre-existing work and research that has been done in the stammering world, really. Like, namely, I Talk Like a River by Jordan Scott and Sydney Smith, at the work by Jerome Ellis, who's also part of the flag team. He's got this amazing book called The Clearing, which has also got an album, and he deals with a lot of themes of water in that. So uh, there also like were loads more. We felt like the wave um really stood for the variability of stuttering too. That is a thing that does kind of like ebb and flow, whirl and crash. And in terms of colors, like we're conscious of the existing kind of sea green color that's been used since I think 2009 in my research. That's what I found, but I don't know if it goes back more than that. Maybe it does. But we wanted to try to a new color, which is the ultramarine blue, as kind of symbolizing the passion and progress of Stuttering Pride. Um, and this is a screenshot of, so this is like, even me looking at this, it looks really weird because this is like like one of the first versions of the flag, and you can see it's not perfect. It's like the curves are all a bit weird and a bit janky. But I think this is when we kind of like decided, okay, like we think this approach might be it. And you can see the excitement from everyone on the right, like everyone's smiling and just like so happy with it. Um, yeah. So in terms of the flag, then we made a really big flag. I've got a friend here in London who is a textile like artist and designer, and it was amazing like making this flag on like a huge scale. Because then we could I use it like at marches and protests, which the first Stammering Pride march happened uh, last August in London. Uh, and I think there'll be another one um um this year in August in Nottingham at Summerfest, if like anyone's going to be there. So yeah, so it's been a really, really, really special project. It's been around the world, like, which has been so amazing. It's ran marathons. It's been in loads of different countries. It's just been amazing seeing how people have it taken it on, like, as this like unified symbol of pride. Yeah. So the last project I'm going to talk about is the billboard, and this one is a bit short because it basically has just come out. But it like isn't really much to show apart from one picture because I haven't been there yet. So, but yeah, this project has just been like amazing. So Jerome Ellis got in, or Jerome Ellis was approached by the Whitney Museum in Manhattan, which is like one of, if not the kind of like top econ contemporary art gallery in the US, and they have commissioned him to make some new work, and part of that was designed for a billboard which they gave to artists um, for like 6 months at a time, I think. Um, and then Jerome approached me, and then this group formed. So it's me, Jerome, Chris Luke, Hubert, Felicia Daniels, and Ja Bin. And we like started talking, I think maybe it was towards at the end of summer last year. And the billboard needed to be designed by, I think it was the start of November. So we had maybe like 2 months, I think, or even a bit less. Like it was a really, really, really tight turnaround. So we knew that the idea needed just to be tight, and the design really, really simple, but like really, really effective. And the main idea came from Jerome, who's the lead of the project, where he's been exploring this idea of time in terms of stammering. And he had this phrase, stuttering can create time. And we all really, really, really loved it. But one thing was kind of the point about how a lot of this kind of stammering pride work is really like flourishing in like English speaking countries, especially Western kind of countries. So we really wanted to have that statement in different languages, and Spanish, Chinese, and English are the most commonly spoken languages in New York. So we chose those ones, and then we worked with translators and a Chinese typography consultant as well. And the design was really, really like interesting because normally when artists get this billboard, they've like got this like intricate painting, or maybe a photograph that's really detailed and really colorful. But me and Jerome really just wanted the statement just to sing by itself, and we did a lot of research into kind of like artists who make work like this, like Jenny Jenny Holzer. But with her work, it's quite dark, and it uses a lot of like white capitalized typography. But we instead wanted this to be warmer and a bit softer, basically like you just got a text from a friend, just so it's a more like accessible message. Because we didn't want it being like this scary kind of statement, almost like an advertised kind of slogan. So basically that's where the design came from. And in terms of the use of space, we really wanted to kind of play with expectation and pause, because that speaks to the experience of stammering so much. So yeah, so basically from the beginning of the Dysfluent project, like with the font, it's now on a billboard in Manhattan, which just is mind blowing to me. So and yeah, so I've actually got a behind the scenes picture of me holding up a proof, which just shows the true scale of the typography, which is mad. I never would have thought that I'd see the font that big up close. And these are some pictures by Priscilla Kubert on the left here, who's part of the team and lives in New York, and then just a screenshot from the Whitney like Instagram account. So I can't wait to go in June when I go to 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 visit New York. But yeah, so that's everything. That's all I'm going to talk about. I think I've made it with enough time for some questions. Maybe like half an hour or maybe a bit less. I don't know how much time people have. But also before the Q&A, I've made a discount code for the ISA. So if you use ISA 20 on the checkout, you can get 20% off whichever like items you want on the shop. So, and these are my links if you want to like contact me or follow the project as it develops. Thank you very much.
Conor, thank you so much. I think it's just so interesting to hear, and you know, your walk through the creative process, I suppose, that we've been able to enjoy the final outcome of your work, but it's really nice to hear sort of how all of that evolved. So there's a few
Thanks,
questions
Penny.
in the chat, so we have time for a few questions. I think I might turn the recording off now, the questions, or what do you think? Would it be, I don't know if anybody feels that would be nice to keep it on, or what do you think?
Maybe we could
It's fine for me.
on,
Yeah.
unless there's any words otherwise.
Okay. So I'm just having a look in the chat. So and so what we can do is if you have a question you'd like to ask Conor, you could give me a wave or raise your hand, or feel free to pop a message into the chat and I can read it out for you. And we also thought it'd be nice just to honour the fact that we've got sort of a wider audience. Sort of we're aware that there's people joining us here from outside of Ireland, which is really lovely. So if you feel comfortable to do so, it would be nice for you to maybe share the country that you're in so we can get a sense of context and maybe how you might be connected to the stammering community. That would be lovely. So is there anybody that would like to ask a question to Conor or anything? I am just looking for any faces waving. I wonder, could we, if you turn your screen share off, Conor, and then we'll be able to see our faces in a little bit more detail, and I can have a look for anybody who would like to ask a question. I suppose, oh, great, Gillian, if you're happy to ask, work away. I think you froze. Oh, you're back.
Here, sorry, I won't move. I was just going to say, I'm here obviously on behalf of Neurodivergent Ireland, and I was just wondering, would stammering be considered as a form of neurodivergence by the stammering community, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Will I take that, Penny? Do you, or yeah? Yeah, I think it's a good question because especially when we are talking about Stammering Pride here, I think for me personally, when I kind of learned about neurodiversity and kind of saw the parallels with the experience of stammering, it really helped me understand myself more. And I think a lot of people who stammer, who do see themselves as neurodivergent, I think may say the same too. So I suppose maybe, and like maybe like other people can like speak to this too, but I think the neurodiversity conversation is still quite new in the stammering world, right? Like in a way. So I don't know if many people like would basically see themselves as such, but
yeah. Sorry, I was just going to contribute on that because I know we've even within the Stammering Pride discussions that we've had before, we've talked about masking and passing as fluent. So I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about probably either of them to know, but I probably would say there are parallels. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. We probably talk a lot about passing as fluent, you know, and I think that's got parallels for neurodivergency too.
Great, thank you. I think it's a really interesting. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Anyone else that's here? I think it's perhaps a new conversation. Yeah, Elaine.
Hi, sorry. I didn't know how to put up my hand on the Zoom. Yeah, same as you, Conor. I think I found out about maybe 6 months ago that stammering is a neurodivergence or could be considered. And for me, I was like, it makes so much sense, like the masking, and I suppose that the fact that I suppose we can kind of get away with people not knowing, you know, and just that whole experience, I think, and it just explains so many things for me. And then when you look at the Pride movement in autism and the acceptance of it, I just find it so inspiring. And like, there's so much, as someone who stammers, there's so much to learn from the autistic community and other divergent communities, or I hope I'm using the right terms here. But yeah, so for me, I think I do see myself as divergent, yeah.
I think that the people who came up with the idea of neurodivergency paradigm, and definitely Stan, who coined the term neurodivergent, definitely took as wide an umbrella as possible. But I didn't want to be, obviously, I'm not a stammerer, so I didn't want to be like, oh, it's a form of neurodivergence if the community didn't feel that. But from my point of view, neurodivergence is any way that your brain differs from, you know, the neuromajority. So it seems to me that it very definitely would fit under this umbrella. And but again, I didn't want to be like, oh, come on in. If you were all like, no, we have no.
Oh, Gillian's hopefully she'll. Oh, you're back.
I think there's some questions in the chat, Penny. Will I?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Let's go to those. So, so just going back up, there was a question just about the words in the folded page. So that was from yours. You're curious to know the smaller sized words. I wonder, is that the front cover?
Yeah, I think it's the words here, Anita, right? Are those the word? Yeah. So they were from the top. I'll read from the top. It says, well, okay, first, I think it's important to remember the quote on the cover, which is, the prouder I get, the more change happens. And then all the other text is kind of in contrast to that. So then it says, I still struggle to talk about it. I see shame in my stammering. All I've ever wanted was to fix it. Pride can be toxic, and I don't want to steamroll other people. And will I ever be happy stammering? So those are all adapted from the actual interviews in the magazine as well. So it's kind of playing with that dichotomy of like, oh, I'm proud of this, but it's also a thing that has caused me a lot of pain. And there are still days that I stammer a lot and it gets to me. So it's not wanting just to make a magazine that's like, oh, proud, 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 proud. It's like, there's way more to it than that. So that's where it came from.
Thank you. And Anita, your hand is up. Would you like to ask a question? And then we'll go back to the chat.
It is more a comment. I am so incredibly inspired by all this, because Stuttering Pride, to me, that means everything. But to many, it is a long road. But there is still so much shame. So the more we show stuttering, the more we dare to stutter and to show that we simply exist. If we can show less shame, then people won't see it as something shameful. If we show shame, then people think this is to be ashamed of. If we hide, people think it should be hidden. So this whole flag, this whole project, it is such a great way to help people to get from shame to Stuttering Pride, because we are here and we stutter, and that's the way we speak. So accept it. I mean, not just us, but the world around us. So I think this whole thing is absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Anita. I really, really appreciate those kind words. And yeah, I think you're right. That I think it's the more we can be proud of this, then the rest of the world can be proud of us, like with us too, right? So it's like, if we're not doing it for like ourselves, then like everyone else isn't going to do it too. So I agree with you 100%.
Thank you, Anita. Nick, you have your hand up. Would you like to go next?
Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Nick. I'm a speech and language therapist from the UK, and sort of on the backbone of what Anita was just saying then, I work with children and young people who stammer, and I have some of the posters, I've got the magazines, etc. And I do utilise them in the work that I do. But I just wondered, Conor, from your perspective, have you got any like hopes of what your work might bring to young people who stammer, but also to speech and language therapists who are supporting people, maybe who are very much in the early stages of their journey and are probably experiencing quite a lot of shame and certainly don't feel any pride in their stammering?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. That's a really, really good question. I think it's really interesting because I think whenever I'm making like work about stammering, I think because I'm a creative person and an artist, I'm making it because I want to make it, or because I'm making for other people that just want to make it. So then the knock-on effect is just like a happy accident that then maybe other people like it too. So I think for like if say I'm making like something that can apply or speak to young people or SLTs, like that's actually not really something that I really do actually think about from the beginning. But I think it's good that I do that because I'm just authentically making a piece of work as a person who stammers. But I would hope that, say, with the magazine, like a lot of what I'm doing now is speaking with like magazine shops, and I spoke on a podcast last week, a design podcast. So I'm trying to get the work in spaces that's not just stammering related, because I think when we do that, I think that really speaks to maybe young people or to just people who stammer in general, because I think like this conversation here is so amazing, but it can be so insular that those people who are struggling, or those people who do feel shame, they may never be in groups like this because they're so scared. But if they maybe see a stammering poster or a stammering flag or a stammering magazine in the real world, then I would hope that that might speak with them on a deeper level than maybe just them kind of being in, like, say, groups like this or different discussions. So yeah, like, I suppose that doesn't really answer your question directly, but I think whatever I do, I would hope that it does speak to young people and speech and language therapists, just because Stammering Pride is in its DNA. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Thanks for your question, though. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. And moving on to Sam, you have your hand up if you would like to go next.
Oh, I think you're muted, Sam.
Thank you for letting me know. Thanks, Penny, and thanks, Conor. It was really lovely hearing you, I guess, walk us through, from college through to now, and all of the different projects that you've been involved in. And there's something I'm really struck by your comment, if the younger you could see you now, kind of talking and advocating for Stammering Pride. The younger you would be really surprised. I mean, it sounds like you've surpassed your own kind of imagination in many ways already. But if you were to look to the future, I'm wondering whether there's anything creatively I don't know, I suppose I'm thinking ahead, anything creatively you would really love to have a chance to create, get involved in relation to stammering and Stammering Pride.
Oh, Sam, that's a really good question. That's really tough. Thank you. I don't know. I think I don't know, to be honest. I think that's a really good question. I think like after doing the billboard, like that was such a mind-blowing thing to even be part of the Whitney Museum's biennial. Like that's just like crazy. So I don't know like what I do next. Probably can't ever top that because that's like at the pinnacle of like contemporary art. So that's crazy. But I think in a personal sense, I really like this project has given me so much. I can't even describe it. It's given me so much professionally and personally. In that like my background is a graphic designer in like corporations and branding. So by exploring Dysfluent more and doing then that kind of birthed Take Courage as well. So I've really it's kind of allowed me to really tap into all the creative things that I love, like which is writing, like even like meeting people, like even talking, even doing this is amazing. And maybe maybe it's more talks, maybe it's more exposure, maybe it's meeting more people, maybe it's bringing stammering to more like to like ideas of the magazine of Stammering Pride to new countries, to new languages, to kind of that kind of idea. But I think one thing that I've been actually thinking about recently is writing. I really do like writing, and I really would love to like write poetry or write like maybe fiction around stammering. Because when I was younger, I used to write a lot of poems and write short stories, and that's something that I haven't done in ages. So maybe that's it. But it's weird me saying that because I've just done a presentation on like loads of visuals. So I'm like, that would be quite a ball curve. But yeah, I suppose that's my answer. Sorry, that was a really, really difficult one. But thank you. It's made me think a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody who would like to ask a question? I suppose one of the, oh, Nora, you go ahead and I'll ask mine.
I'm taking organizers' privilege and asking a question too. I'm really moved by the conversations so far and how much kind of enthusiasm there is for your work, Conor. Moved but not surprised. Two things kind of popped up for me while you were speaking. One is I'm so glad to hear that you were on that that podcast in a like non-stammering specific space, because I think that is absolutely the next frontier, the new frontier, is that we hear stammering in non-stammering specific spaces. We hear it in the wild, and I think it's so important both for fellow people who stammer. And Conor, you talked about that first time meeting a fellow person who stammers and how amazing that was. I can absolutely remember the moment I met a fellow person who stammered for the first time in the wild, as I say. But it's also so important for people who don't stammer to hear stammered speech, and not only talking about stammering, but talking about all sorts of things that our lives are full of. We there are many strings to our bow, and Conor, your presentation really showed that. So I'm so glad to hear about that podcast, and you might share it in the link in the chat, because I'd love to hear it. And the other thing that really occurred to me when you were sharing your beautiful slides is that there's a quote that I often use, which is by Chris Constantino, which many people might be familiar with his work. He's a speech and language academic and therapist, I suppose. He's one of the, along with Sam, one of the contributors and editors to the book Stammering Pride and Prejudice, and he said, he has a quote of stammering is a radical act, and I love that, and that has really stuck with me. And what occurs to me about your work, Conor, is that like seeing stammering in an appealing, in a visually beautiful, aesthetically appealing way, that is in and of itself a radical act, because it has for so long been presented, been understood as something, you know, bad, heart, horrible, disconcerting, like you say, but to see it as something beautiful and something appealing, I just think is really, really powerful.
Yeah. Thank you, Nora. Yeah, like I think like like that is the thing that basically kind of guides all the decision making that I do with Dysfluent, that I wanted to be beautiful, to look cool, to be desirable, and like that's something that, because I think like when I think it's really interesting just from some of the work what I do with Dysfluent, but also with Take Courage, that we work with a lot of stammering organizations like the ISA, where it's like, I think in years gone by, I think the visual culture or aesthetic of stammering, it needs a rebrand. Like it needs to be redone, and that's I think what I'm trying to do essentially, because I really believe in the way that things look really affect the way we feel and the way we talk about ourselves. And I think if I can make like a magazine or a poster or a flag that looks cool, then I think that speaks to the relationship that we have with ourselves. So that is something that I think about a lot. Like when I'm making work, that I just wanted to be cool and like look nice. So yeah.
Stammering
Oh
is
yeah.
cool. That's our next slogan. So
But yeah, just on the podcast. So I only it was just recorded last week, so I think it comes out maybe next week. But I'll send you the link. But yeah, that was really interesting, because like I was also thinking of you, Nora, because you've done loads of podcasts now, and it's so amazing that you're stammering. You know, it's amazing. So that really excited me, because like although I am talking about stammering and the magazine, of course, in that podcast, it's still amazing, yeah, that they like, of course the host like wouldn't be like, oh you can't stammer, like of course he wouldn't, but I was still just like, oh, is that okay, like I'm going on your podcast, is that acceptable? And that's weird that was in my head, because we don't hear about it, like we don't hear stammering in podcasts or like TV and all this kind of stuff. So but yeah, but I'll message the link out when that goes live.
I'm really sorry, I can't find my raise hand gesture, so I have to butt in here for a moment. Yeah, thanks a million, Conor. I have to say, as a kind of an artist in a way myself, I just love the creativity in what you're doing. And I just wonder how, because I think getting involved and getting stuck into some kind of something creative has a life of its own, nearly. I think you kind of lose yourself in it in some way, and you're surprised by what shows up for you, and the ideas that pop up, and even just the visual things that pop up for you. And I think the message you're sending out is so powerful. And as somebody who's a speech and language therapist and an ally of people who stammer, I think somebody like me has so much to gain from being part of this community, because I just feel I've learned so much, and it's changed me radically as well. And your art is, I would describe it more as art than graphic design. I just think it's really, really powerful. And just from a creative perspective, I have to say I really enjoy it, and it triggers a lot of sort of emotion, and in a way, it passes by language and words completely. It just hits you at a different level completely to the impact it has on the rest of us. So it's really wonderful, you know. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Adele. It's very kind. I mean, yeah, because I think like you kind of mentioned there that like there's things that can come up, or like that there's things that like I might be working on, like the magazine or the flag or designs, and yeah, like it really it's basically me spending time with myself and spending time with other people too. So that's what's really beautiful about it, that I get to meet such incredible people because of this project, and also spend time with myself and work, and I talk and think about stammering constantly, which is exhausting at times, of course. But I think it's actually really helped me. Like it's like I think in the start of the presentation with the font that like I was having a hard time in college, and that's true. And then I would decided, oh, I'm going to explore this through typography, and that was like almost like a self therapeutic like action that I took just to try to like spend time with this thing, and I've been with like ever since. So yeah.
Thanks, Conor. I'm sort of really curious about the posters in the magazine, where with the speakers you've sort of taken a quote and then sort of designed it in a way that represents each of the speakers' voices. And I suppose for me, I know the voices of the people who you interviewed in the magazine, and I could actually hear their talking and their rhythm through how you'd represented it, and it was very authentic. It felt to me like sheet music for stammering, the way that you had been able to capture that. And I'm really interested in how you found that process in terms of actually hearing and sort of translating something that we tend to experience just through listening, and it's quite unusual to be able to experience that through visual print, able to sort of translate one form to another. And I wondered if that was quite difficult, or if you found sort of the way that you managed to do that. I'm sort of interested.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Penny. Wow, these questions are really making me think. So with the posters, I've actually got one here. I'll just take one down to show. So these posters are like they're A3 posters, but this it's gonna shine, but it's kind of just typography based. So okay, you can't really see it, but it's fine. But I can send a link maybe afterwards. But they're also in the magazine. But basically, with each like interview, I picked like a phrase maybe that I thought was really nice, and then I've visualized it like as a poster, and played with the typography to express how that person stammered. So with this one with Crystal, in terms of the approach, I'm just trying to think. I think the way I approach design and art is quite analytical at times, and I think say if I even think about how I made the font, that I kind of base it on the prolongations, the repetitions, the blocks, that I'm kind of like making a system of how the stammer is heard, or the way it sounds maybe. So then with these posters, I was like, okay, I'm listening to Crystal, like I can hear a lot of like fricatives, like I think like S and F, and I think those are fricatives anyway, but and how she doesn't stretch words, but she'll just do like kind of like really, really sharp, fast kind of like S sounds. And I did that with every interviewee, that I basically listened to their interview and really just kind of wrote down, oh, Puneet kind of pauses before he speaks. Okay, that can be a thing I can play on visually. Or Patrick, I think maybe like elongates the middles of the middle of words. And then I just kind of like basically picked that and then just went with it. And like I had a lot of fun, because I really wanted these posters to just be expressive and just lean on one kind of maybe part of their stammering. It doesn't mean that that's the only way they stammer, of course. So yeah, those posters were really fun, and they actually were done a really last minute. They were done, oh my God, probably like 2 or 3 weeks before print, because I needed to like, I thought I was going to have like images of the people, but I was just like, they're all in different countries. I literally don't know how the hell I'm going to do this. And then I was like, okay, I might as well just lean on typography and lean on stammering, lean on voice, and just like make these expressive posters. So that's where they came from. And then with your one, Penny, that was like obviously a challenge because you don't stammer. So I was like, oh crap, okay. So I basically made this kind of system, but then I realized, oh, but also like everyone stammers, everyone like if you speak, there's stammering there's this fluency there. There's still going to be things that I can lean on. So it doesn't mean that then I can't make a poster like that for non-stammering people. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, for me, I love the fact that you're sort of, you know, providing another way of really authentic representation. So that we can continue that authenticity through text, but in a really creative way that perhaps current typeface and fonts kind of are restrictive and can't allow that. So that's lovely.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a question? And if not, there's 2 things. So if you do have a question, now is the chance. One would be lovely for us to get a photo, if that's okay. And second, while everyone is checking themselves in the camera to get their best smiley face on, I just would like for the video and for memory just to read through some of the lovely comments, because they won't be captured on the video. So let's see from the beginning. So I really like the phrase "making waves" as Stammering Pride is disruptive in society. And yeah, I think the analogy of water, yeah, and it speaks to that. That's so incredibly inspiring. Thank you, Conor. Really interesting and beautifully explored ideas in your work. Thank you so much for sharing the processes behind the work. Every children and youth camp should have the flag. For me, the idea of developing pride for the benefit of others is really inspiring. And I really like the phrase I've heard Mark use, stammering for the next person. So I loved Dysfluent is what I do in my spare time. I'm so going to use that. And then we need more people who stammer in game shows and movies. Let's get loud. And then, we need to make stammering sexy, in a sense that when we stammer, people want to get to know us. And we've had real fun in a group with the poster. The kids were laughing as they tried to hold on to an S sound for as long as possible. And then, yeah, thank you, Conor. Lovely to hear and see the progression of work over the years. Honoured and humbled to have been involved in small ways, and can't wait to continue supporting and being part of the movement. From Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm sorry, Boone, you might need to help me. I've only read that, but I've never said it out loud.
That's okay. It's Aotearoa. Aotearoa. Yeah.
Aotearoa. Thank you. Lovely. So yes, and then the final one, it's great to have a system for writing stammering. I was interviewed by a researcher and they didn't really know how to represent it. Yeah, that's interesting. So does anybody have any last comments or questions before we all pose for a group photo? Oh, Jude, yes, please go ahead.
I really enjoyed this. I'm finding it quite emotional, but the work you're doing is brilliant, Conor. Really brilliant. I'm living quite close to where you're from, just the other side of the bay. The bay, anyway, at the moment. But I just, I suppose, I'm just thinking about how we all, the notion of paying attention to how we all sound, how I sound, how us all sounds, we all sound. And to have a way of expressing that is just so important, and for all of us. I mean, as a way of facing and paying attention to us, to each of us as individuals, I suppose, and the value that brings. And I just, I'd love that. I'd love to get I was looking at your shop to see if I could get a flag, because I just think the flag is really great. Those symbols, it's just really creative work, and I love it. And I've really enjoyed this today. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jude. I really appreciate your kind words. And oh yeah, and sorry, just on the flag, I forgot to mention that the flag has been out of stock for like months, and we've been trying to get it back up, but it's going to be live again by the end of this week. So I can like send a link around, and maybe it can be shared or something in the group or something. Because I know it's been a while since it's been available. So yeah, just thought I'd say that.
Oh, Vincent, would you like to jump in there? Yeah.
Just one thing about, speaking of flags and that, have you thought about getting a lapel pin or some sort of a little pin which could prompt somebody to ask you what's that for, you know, and it could sort of break the ice. So when there's, you know, just something small.
Yeah, it's a really good idea, Vincent. Yeah, I there's so many stammering flag like context and merch that we could produce. It's just become quite a challenge, honestly, with like financially in the production and postage of things. So with this new, when the shop goes live at the end of the week, it's like it's being the flags are being drop shipped. So that means that they are produced in like factory and then they go straight to the customer, because we did find it quite difficult to post out like everything by hand. So when you're talking about the pins, it is actually quite difficult to find things like that can be of good quality for drop shipping. But it is something that we do talk about a lot in terms of, even like I think maybe did Nora or Penny have pins or not pins, badges maybe there.
Yeah,
so it's like
I printed duck safety pins to them. They're probably not very good quality, but
So yeah, and like that is the thing that me and the group are like kind of frustrated by, that it's like, oh, like there's so many amazing things that we could make, but it is quite hard with the time and the resources that we have. But we'll definitely keep it in mind, and we'll let you know, because I think it's good that we have big flags, but like we're trying to get them into smaller contexts, because obviously like not everyone can have a big flag in their bedroom or something, you know what I mean? So yeah, thank you though.
Yeah, it sounds like it might be hard to get on the loose with the big flag, whereas if you had a little pin, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Lovely. Voon is ready. He went to get the copy of his Dysfluent magazine. Oh, where did I put mine?
Thanks, Voon. I've got mine here too. Yeah, I got mine too.
Okay, so will we do our group photo? So I'll count down from 3 so everyone can hold the cheesy grin for 3 seconds. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see. Beautiful. That is lovely. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for coming this evening. So we'll keep you posted in our next Pride events. I think our next sort of event will be in June for Bród Stadaireachta to take part in Bród in the Pride Parade, in Dublin Pride Parade. So we'll be taking part of that, if there is anybody who will be in Dublin and interested in coming along. And again, Conor, thank you so much for your time this evening and for speaking to us all. I think it's given us a lot of food for thought and inspiration, and yeah, really sort of creating space. And it reminds me of one of Willemine's drawings, where she says, and I'm allowed to take up that space. And I think having a flag and a font, it's really sort of just yeah, giving those options and opportunities. So thank you so much to everybody. Thanks for all of you for coming along.
Thanks everyone.
Okay.